I was born into the bloodiest part of the 20th century, and that is the second half. First half was kind of brutal and bloody too, but the second half of the 20th century was, all right, the second 2/3. All right, the second 3/5, whatever. Starting around 1940, 1935. I wasn't born then, but shortly after that. And because of when and where I was born, over the years I've come into a full understanding of the horrific violence and brutality that people have committed against one another on this little blue dot for such a long period of time. But I'm talking about the second half, more or less, of the 20th century. I am still haunted by the book Treblinka. I am haunted by the slaughter in Vietnam, in Cambodia, the purges in China after the communists took over. Just goes on and on. There have been, and of course the Holocaust, there have been horrific events in the 20th century. Now, granted, horrific events in the 17th and 18th centuries during the colonization of this hemisphere by Europeans and subsequent slavery. But as far as planned, programmed slaughter, when you consider Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Treblinka, Bergen-Belsen, just on and on, when you consider the slaughter of innocents in Gaza, Palestine, it's pretty overwhelming. It is so overwhelming for me sometimes, it's absolutely breathtaking, and it's literally, I mean that. And it's the one thing that tells me over and over again that at this point in my life, I should step away from this. And then I stop and think, well, you know, you're an observer. Well, I was being suckled by my mother. There were children in the death camps in Poland, in Germany, just about my age, who were being burned alive. And when I was playing after school, after kindergarten, or preschool, not kindergarten, but preschool, when I was a little kid, nursery school we used to call it, just a baby, there were children my age being incinerated in a nanosecond in Japan as a result of nuclear explosions. And I think about sometimes, you know, people ask me, well, what kind of a childhood did you have? Well, you know, I had the typical 40s and 50s, actually 50s upbringing of that most Americans had. Working class, lower working class, very low. At different times, we dipped into the non-working poor, as a matter of fact. That's a whole different story. But in terms of how I grew up, aside from the socioeconomic reality of my family, there was this overarching feeling of I was protected. I didn't have to worry about death camps. Of course, I didn't know about death camps back then. That wasn't until I got into my teen years. But I didn't have to worry about any of it. There were no worries. I didn't have to worry about bombs falling. I didn't have to worry about missiles or drone strikes or poison gas or firestorms or watching my family die or seeing beheadings. I was safe in that regard. There was violence inside the family, my nuclear family, but I looked at that violence as, well, it's horrible, I hate it, I want to make it stop, but it wasn't unique. In the 50s, are you kidding me? In the 50s, that's when husbands, fathers had a perfect legal right to beat the hell out of members of their family if they felt like it, their wives or children. But that's a different story. So all this violence, all this slaughter, the slaughter of innocents, that's the part that has stayed with me. I grew up watching war movies in the 50s. That's war movies and westerns, right? And it was always about adults killing adults. You know, American soldiers killing enemy soldiers, American cowboys killing Indians. It was always adults killing adults. And when I got older and started reading about the atrocities committed against children in my century, I could hardly handle it. I mean it. It's a kind of information, the kind of knowledge that pushes you right to the brink if you are, you know, at a certain consciousness level, I guess. It can push you right to the brink of going nuts or feeling like you're going to go crazy. That realization that you are part of the species that is capable of slaughtering innocent children. There's a piece at Salon right now by expat girl, and it's entitled Wood Chips. And she takes the title from what was a supposed quote by Joseph Stalin. And the quote was about slaughtering people during the purges in Soviet Russia in the 30s. And here's the quote: "When you chop wood, chips fly." Has to do with collateral damage. Now, the reason expat wrote about this comes from an Israeli pilot who was dismissing the killing of Palestinian women and children with the phrase, "When you chop wood, chips fly." And when this pilot was informed by the person interviewing him about the slaughter of innocent people, he informed the pilot that he was in fact quoting Stalin. And at that point, the pilot was, according to expat girl, appropriately shocked and asked that the quote be deleted. And as expat girl wrote at Salon, she was glad that the quote was not deleted, for it shows just how far down the rabbit hole the thinking that drives Israeli policy is when it comes to dehumanizing Palestinians. Now, the pilot was not actually quoting Stalin. He was quoting Nikolai Ivanovich Yezhov, who is the head of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs. In Russian, those letters work out to NKVD. Now, you know, if you are of a certain age, you know what the NKVD was. It was the forerunner to the KGB, and it was an internal terror organization, the likes of which I don't think the world has seen since. And the NKVD was active during the most brutal period of Stalin's Great Purge. And this guy Yezhov, Nikolai Yezhov, was known as a devout Bolshevik and a loyal follower of Stalin. In 1935, he wrote a paper, expat girl shares with us. He wrote a paper on Stalinism in which he argued that since political unorthodoxy was impossible in a perfect communist state, any form of political opposition to Stalinist policies was actually evidence of conspiracy by what he called disloyal elements, and that those elements had to be rooted out. They were enemies of the people, and they had to be brutally murdered. We'll be right back. So this got my attention. It's a piece at Salon by expat girl. The phrase "when you chop wood, chips fly" that was attributed to Stalin, and that unbeknownst to an Israeli pilot when he was bombing and killing recently women and children in Gaza. The pilot used that phrase, "Well, when you chop wood, chips fly," in reference to the dead innocent people. And when told that was a quote from Stalin, of course, the pilot freaked out. But it wasn't Stalin. It was a guy, Nikolai Ivanovich Yevsov, who was the head of the NKVD during the most brutal period of the Great Purge in Russia. Now, under the direction of Yevsov, let me tell you a little bit about him, because Expat Girl has this in her column. In 1 year alone, the NKVD arrested at least 1.3 million people, shot to death 681,692 people for, quote, crimes against the state, end quote, tripled the size of the Gulag population to 685,201. And by the way, that's where more than 140,000 more people died from horrible conditions. And as Expat Girl points out, without a doubt, the majority of Yevsov's victims were innocent. But that caused no crisis of conscience in Comrade Yevsov. Indeed, it was the opposite. This is what he said, Yevsov, quote, "There will be some innocent victims in this fight against fascist agents. We are launching a major attack on the enemy. Let there be no resentment if we bump someone with an elbow. Better that 10 innocent people should suffer than one spy get away. When you chop wood, chips fly." Now, as Expat Girl points out, while his 10-to-1 view, better that 10 innocent people, than one spy escape, that view has been echoed by others in history. Bismarck used it, Pol Pot used it. However, in Genesis 18, verses 23 to 32, it says this, quote, "Abraham drew near and said, 'Will you consume the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous within the city? Will you consume and not spare the place for the 50 righteous who are in it? What if 10 are found there?' The Lord said, 'I will not destroy it for the 10's sake.'" End quote. Now, this idea of wood chips, or chips will fly, also stands in contrast with the thinking of philosophers, statesmen like William Blackstone, Ben Franklin, John Adams. And Expat Girl shares with us that while compiling his highly influential set of books on English common law, William Blackstone expressed the famous ratio this way, quote, "All presumptive evidence of felony should be admitted cautiously, for the law holds it better that 10 guilty persons escape than that one innocent party suffer." End quote. Now, that axiom, or variation of it, was absorbed by the British legal system in the early 19th century. It was also absorbed into American common law, yada, yada, yada. Law students are taught this all the way into the 21st century. Ben Franklin stated it this way, quote, "It is better that 100 guilty persons should escape than that one innocent person should suffer." That's, end quote, Franklin. Now, the names of many of Stalin's killer, Yevsov, the names of those wood chips have been lost to history. But I have been provided, through the courtesy of Expat Girl, and also from David Harris Gershon's diary at Salon, a list of the victims. It's an incomplete list. And the list of victims includes the young Israeli soldiers who are now dead, most of whom in their early 20s because of conscription. And so those are the victims of Hamas, we could put it that way. And also the Gazan victims of the Israelis. The people on both lists were just that, people. Living, breathing, dreaming people. And they are now dead. When we come back after this break, I am going to share with you the names and ages of some of the Gazans if you want to see the names and ages of the Israeli military, you can go to Salon.com and look for Expat Girl's diary entry, which is entitled Wood Chips. We'll be right back. So that's the preamble to what I want to share with you. And I'm not going to go down the entire list of names. There are 2,000 names, approximately, and ages of Gazans, and another, I don't know what, 35 or 40 Israeli military personnel. But when I found this at Salon, that expat girl had posted, at first I just read her article, her entry, and learned something. I learn something every day. I learned that it was not Stalin who said, "When you chop wood, chips fly." That it wasn't Stalin at all. It was someone even more violent and vicious and brutal and bloodthirsty than Joseph Stalin. And that was enough. Like, okay, that was my lesson for today. But then I scrolled down and started looking at the names and ages of some of the dead in Gaza. And I was struck by the fact that most of them are under the age of 40, the vast majority. There are a couple, Naifa Mohammed Tahir Farj Allah, who is 80 and female. But then I see names like Mohammed Fajr Mustafa Jamal Malka, who is age 2, little boy, age 2. And then I find Siraj Iyad Ali Abdeladel, who is 7, little boy, 7. Qasim Jabir Edwan Auda, 11, little boy. Hussein Yusuf Kware, 13, little boy. Bassem Salem Kware, 10, little boy. Nithal Kalf Al Nawasra, little boy, age 4. Muhammad Kalf Awad Al Nawasra, little boy, age 2. Ranim Judat Abdel Karim Abdel Ghafour, little girl, age 2. You see what I mean? And I look at the names and the ages here, and I wonder who will know that they lived and died in such a violent way other than their family members. And even if you do secure a list of all these names and ages and genders, it still doesn't tell you anything about these innocent people. It tells you nothing. There are no profiles with these names. Remember, after the bombing of the World Trade Towers in New York, the New York Times published, I believe, a photo, if one was available, and the names, and a little thumbnail sketch of every single person that died. And I thought it was one of the most moving things I had ever seen in the field of journalism. So here's Yasmin Mohammed Youssef Amatauk, little girl, age 3. We don't know anything about her except that she's dead. She was killed by Israeli bombing. Here's another little girl, Noor Marwan Abdallah Al-Najdi, 11 years old. I wonder what her house looked like. I wonder if she had a tricycle. Here's a little boy, Saher Salman Ali Abu Namos, 3 years old. 3? Jesus, God. On and on. A lot of teenagers in here, in this list. Like I said, most of the people are under the age of 40. The vast majority. Mueed Khalid Ali Alarj, 3 years old, little boy. 3. And having had children, myself, having been a parent to both little boys and little girls, I see a name like that, I see a name, Moeed Khalid Ali Alaj, 3 years old, a male. I think about my son Chris when he was 3 years old, how much fun he was and how innocent he was and how challenging he was. No daddy. And I wonder if this little 3-year-old boy, I wonder if he was challenging to his family. I wonder if he had sisters, brothers. When you look at this list of dead people, you see, here's a family, the Al-Batesh family. 18-year-old male, dead. 26-year-old male, dead. These are all same family. 22-year-old male, dead. 25-year-old female, dead. 48-year-old male, dead. 20-year-old male, dead. 18-year-old male, dead. 13-year-old female, dead. 4-year-old female, dead. 10-year-old male, dead. 13-year-old male, dead. All named Al-Batesh. And when I see that, when I see a cluster of names like that, who were blown to pieces by, in this case, Israeli artillery or Israeli missiles. I wonder, and this is, I don't know, this is part of my mental disorder, I guess, but I wonder, that family of 11 who died together, what were they doing the last moment? Did the older ones reach out and try to bring the younger ones into their arms to hold them, protect them? Now, don't misunderstand. When I used to look at the horrific pictures from Auschwitz or the other death camps, and I would see the little kids getting off the trains that the Nazis had put them on, and I would see the moms and the dads, until they were separated, reach out and take their hands. I got the same feeling. Of course, I saw pictures. I didn't know the names or ages of these little Jewish children, but the look of a combination of innocence and fear and horror. And here I was, 50 years later, looking at these pictures, realizing that these were the last pictures. These were just moments before these children were incinerated. And now I look at these names of these kids from Gaza, and the ones that are not so kid, a little bit older. And I don't have the pictures, but I have seen pictures of children in Gaza, Palestinian children. And something that is, I don't want to be accused of lookism. Remember that phrase from the 80s? Lookism was when you favored someone who was pretty, man or woman. You were guilty of lookism. Remember that insanity? I don't want to be guilty of it here, but when I have seen pictures of Palestinian children, they are just so beautiful, aren't they? Have you noticed that about Syrian children? Iraqi children? Israeli children? They're just so pretty. And the distinguishing characteristic that has stood out to me when I look at pictures of these kids from the Middle East are their big eyes. Have you noticed that? They have those big eyes, innocent, almost like, remember the Keane paintings, Bill Keane? I think it was Bill Keane. Was it? I don't know who it was, but back in the 70s, and they were just so gauche. I mean, pictures of little children with the great big eyes, and we all made fun of them. But that's because they were exaggerated. But these little children, the pictures I have seen, they're not exaggerated. It's just that they have large, dark eyes, most of them. Some of them have large blue eyes, large sand-colored eyes. Sarah Omar Ahmed Sheikh Aliad, 4 years old, little girl. She died with Omar Ahmed Abdallah Sheikh Aliad, who is 27, a male. Same family. I wonder what their relationship was. Don't you? Don't you wonder that? I mean, you can't look at these lists and the names and the ages and not wonder. Ahed Itaf Ahed Bakir, 10-year-old little boy. My daughter's 10. Zachariah Ahed Subhi Bakir, another 10-year-old little boy. Were they twins? Same family. Mohammed Ramez Izzat Bakir, 11 years old, male. Ismail Mohammed Subhi Bakir, 10 years old, male. Hamza Raed Mohammed Thari, 6 years old, male. And you know, I was also thinking here, as I read these names, as I read them earlier today and then again this evening, in just a few minutes, about 10 minutes from now, when we wrap the show up and turn the lights out in the studio and go upstairs, and I'll go through my little routines, and then I'll climb in bed and maybe listen to some classical music on NPR, which takes the edge off the day. And then I'll go to sleep. And I know, although this is not real, I know I'll wake up in the morning, because I might not. But I tell myself that, just like little kids. I guess it's something that we hold on to, right? Little kids go to sleep at night. I realize little kids go through a death awareness thing where they start to get fearful. But if you're a good parent or grandparent or aunt or uncle, you can help them through that. But I think about these little kids in Gaza who went to bed every single night to the sound of bombs and missiles, tanks, gunfire, screams, sirens, wails, moans. And I wonder how they went to sleep at night. But the death list goes on. There's no way I can read them all, but by God, I'm going to read some of them. Here's a little 1-year-old boy named Faris Jama'a Hamad Al-Tarabin. 1 year old. He probably didn't differentiate between bombs going off and squeals of laughter at a birthday party, right? Mohammed Salem Ibrahim Natiez, 4 years old, little boy. Rahaf Khalil Hamada Al-Jabur, 4 years old, little girl. This list goes on and on. And, well, when you post the names and ages of close to 2,000 people on a website, it makes quite a list. Along with the 40 or 50 names of the Israeli soldiers who died. They're all young, too. None of them 4 years old or 1 year old or 6 or 3 or 9 or 13. But all of them in their early 20s, almost all. And yeah, I wonder about them, too. I wonder about those Israeli soldiers. But here's the difference. They were involved in an aggressive action against a civilian population. So while I wonder about the dead Israeli soldiers, not so much as I wonder about these little kids on the other end of rocket fire and missiles and bombs and screams. And when I see these names and ages, here's one, Nagam Mahmoud Abdelhamid Azuwaidi, 2-year-old little girl. Rayat Mahmoud Abdelhamid Al-Zuwadi, 3-year-old little girl. Now, 2 years old and 3 years old, you're old enough to understand fear and terror and panic. Not intrinsically, but when you see the adults around you who are frantic because there is nothing they can do to protect themselves. Nothing. Nothing. And those adults, in their last moments, probably understood what was about to happen. Just like in the death camps at Treblinka and Bergen-Belsen and Auschwitz and Dachau, the parents understood as they held the hands of their little children exactly what was about to happen. What an unmitigated horror. To be an adult, to be a parent, and know what's about to happen. And that what is about to happen is death. Qassem Hamid Elwan, 4 years old, little boy. Imad Hamid Elwan, 7-year-old little boy. Cousins, brothers. Razak Ahmed Al-Hayek, 2-year-old little boy. Hania Abdel Rahman Abdul-Jarad, 3-year-old little girl. Sami Naim Abdul-Jarad, a 1-year-old little boy. Here's another of the same family, a little 1-year-old little boy, Musa Abdel Rahman Abdul-Jarad, 1-year-old. Is there ever any justification for the murder of children? If there is, I wish somebody other than American bomber pilots about to unleash hell over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or Israeli pilots ready to unleash death over Gaza City, or Nazis ready to unleash death in the camps, or American bombers ready to unleash death over German cities, or Chinese death squads ready to slaughter everybody in sight. Is there any justification for the killing of innocent children? Any justification at all? When you chop wood, chips fly?